All right, what's going on, guys? Today we are going to be going over a leg workout that is designed to help fix your asymmetries in your imbalances if you fall into this right lateralized or left AIC pattern, or you have scoliotic tendencies, however you want to look at it. If you deal with these common asymmetries that I see in tons of bodybuilders, this is the workout for you. So if you don't know if you fall into this category, people that benefit from this workout, you can take a look at my PRI and bodybuilding videos, see if you fall into the left AIC pattern. But some other ways that you could tell that you were right lateralized would be just noticing that you always feel heavier on your right side. Maybe you just feel like you're more on your right foot when you're walking. You notice that things are different, like when you're hinging, you might turn into the right side. Just little things like even your ability to get off of your side. Like you can just bring up one leg and see how much you can push through the ground with the down leg to raise that top knee, and that will tell you if you're in balance. A lot of times, like the right knee will go up a lot easier because we can push and activate those posterior glute mid fibers on the left side a lot easier. Sometimes when we lift up the left leg, it's a little funky, like you can't connect to it. And that's just a quick little test that I'll do often to see if I'm off. And so if you're off, you might know what I'm talking about, but if not, I'll just show you the pelvis real quick. So if you're in a left AIC pattern, or you're right lateralized, or you've been diagnosed with the most common type of scoliosis, the typical type you'll see, you're gonna end up in a little bit of a position like this. Now from here, you can have various degrees of anterior tipping, where you're just going forward, of like moving forward in gravity with a slight anterior tip. You can have different amounts of rotation. You can also have this left side coming over the top. So you can have slightly different presentations and slightly different issues, but overall, it'll all be the same underlying issues, meaning that this left side of your pelvis is more ER biased. The sacrum is going to be more counter-nutated. This ilium is going to be externally rotated and going outward. And the right side is going to be more IR biased. The sacrum will have a slight turn to the right. This ilium will be slightly more internally rotated, and the sacrum will be more nutated. So you're going to be a lot better at using your right side as a stance leg, and your left leg is going to be a leg that you kind of want to get off of and use for more external rotation bias moves. So if you feel just really different when you're doing like a Bulgarian split squat, this is probably why. And you're never going to be completely symmetrical. I want to make sure that you guys don't get super neurotic on me. I know it's easy, and especially with the stuff I talk about, sometimes it can foster some neuroses. That's not what I want. You're going to be asymmetrical to a certain degree, but we can't be like so asymmetrical that it starts to develop our bodies differently. So if you're in this pattern, all of your internal rotation measurements on your right side are going to be better than on the left. And what I mean by that is there's really no real thing as like planes of motion. So when you hear things like adduction and extension, those are really just different expressions of internal rotation. Same thing with flexion and abduction. Those are just different representations of external rotation. So all the external rotation measurements are going to be worse on the right side. All the internal rotation measurements will be worse on the left. So your right side will have better IR, adduction, and hip extension. Your left side will have better ER, hip flexion, and hip abduction. Now you might not fall 100% into those categories. Sometimes if you're really turned or you're compressed in certain ways, you could be getting like fake readings as far as ER and IR. But usually your hip abduction tests will kind of tell you the truth. Just lay on the ground, see how high you can lift up your leg. If you have a lot more abduction on your left side than your right, that's pretty normal. You're gonna be turned towards that right side. But another way to see if you're lateralized is just this easy test. All right, so for this, you're just gonna go to your back. You're gonna put one foot flat, and you just wanna let that knee fall into adduction and see what you got, okay? So I'm just gonna hold it in. And you also wanna see what it feels like at the in range. Do you get like actually shortening of the inner tissues? Do you feel kind of like a cramping there, or do you just kind of hit a block and you don't feel anything? So if you look here, this is going across my midline. I've got somewhat decent adduction on my right side. All right, let's look at the left. That's it. That's a lot less. And it's a lot different feeling there. And as I try to push through that wall, it feels a lot different. So that's me really jamming. I'm nowhere really near across the midline of my body, and I don't feel that same shortening, tightening sensation I feel in my right groin. So that's another sign that you're gonna be turned to the right. So again, sometimes your IR and ER measurements might be reversed, not usually the case, but you can do this to see if something's just funky and you really are lateralized, you're just compressed in a certain way that's currently showing you to have more IR on the left than the right. But as you get rid of those outer layer compensations, you'll really start to present pretty typical left AIC if you fall in this category. Okay, so why do we even care about this? Why are we going to address this? Well, for one, if you're really asymmetrical, you're going to have pain, most likely. A lot of times this is in your back, sometimes it's in your knees. There's a lot of things that are going to go wrong because as you start getting crooked in your axial skeleton, everything peripheral from your axial skeleton starts to change its position as well. So as this ilium starts to ER, eventually the femur starts to ER with it, and you just start getting different lines of tension. You start running out of kind of movement variability options because you're stuck in certain positions. And so the fluid dynamics of your joints get thrown off, muscles become eccentrically or concentrically oriented, and over time that's just going to lead to some wear and tear. Also, it's going to create imbalances. Legs can look really imbalanced on stage if you're a competitive bodybuilder. You will often see really overdeveloped right adductors, pretty universal. A lot of times the left vastus latalis can be really overdeveloped, and then you see differences in glutes. You see all kinds of things. So this is something that we want to be aware of and address, but again, like I said, we don't want to obsess over. So like I said, check out the PRI and bodybuilding videos to get all the tests that you can do to see if you do fall into this left AIC category. And then what I'm going to cover here is your warm-ups that you would want to do. So it's going to be kind of like the breathing drills first, the positional breathing drills to create the space so that we have space to move into, and we kind of increase our ability to produce internal rotation force with that. And then we're going to go into some like warm-up, lightly loaded drills that are going to help kind of shift our sacrum and get our body a little bit better suited for bilateral moves and our heavy loaded moves. So we're going to start with a post-capsule inhibition on the left side. Now, we usually want to do your inhibitions first. This is my go-to move for my lower body. This tends to just fix all my issues, because all my issues and pretty much all your issues, they're positional issues. Anytime you got something funky going on, it's usually something is off with the shape of your axial skeleton. And again, those fluid dynamics I talked about are off. Your joints are not in its optimal position. So as soon as you can get it lined up, usually the whole system kind of takes care of itself. Like anytime I feel anything in my left knee, if I do this move, it automatically goes away. Because what I'm doing on this is essentially I'm getting this left hip, this left ilium to shift back and match that right side. I'm going to reorient the pelvis a little bit as I do that too. So as I do that, that's going to take a lot of pressure off the knee. Last time I went to Vegas to work with Sergio, my ankle got just funky after driving for so long and just being in weird positions. I tend to kind of just go like there whenever I'm driving. And this is something you got to be aware of too, is that you don't make your postural presentation worse when you're not in the gym. So you got to have a little bit of awareness. But I had a lot of issues with my ankle, and I did this move, fixed it right away. The old me would have really looked at my ankle and tried to do things directly for it. Spent a long time on that. This took 45 seconds and then totally fixed. So what you want to do on this is you're going to be driving really pretty good pressure through those inner two contact points, the inner heel and that first med head. As you're doing that, you're shifting the left hip back as you push that right knee forward. Sometimes it can be helpful to hold a ball here. And it's almost like as you push that right knee forward, if we want your pelvis to reorient a little bit and turn, you kind of want to like make sure that left leg is anchored. You can't let your butt move around a little bit. You're going to like turn that pelvis. You're going to push the right side forward and around so we get a little bit of orientation. You just can't let your butt wiggle around as you do that. So you should feel some left like hamstring attachment, depending on how hinged you get, in that left inner thigh. So I'm driving down with that inner foot. I'm pushing forward with this knee. And then at a certain point, I like to switch it after like really applying like a forward rotation force. Then I start to just almost push back on the right leg to get to the left. So I start like keep the right knee in front of the left, but now I'm driving back on the left. So that's a little more of a relative motion that I'm trying to accomplish with that. So first I start kind of rotating around. I'm trying to get the pelvis to reorient, and then I'm trying to push back on it to get that relative motion. So it's all about the breaths on here. You should have a natural little side bend on that left side. Close down those left ribs. Those right ones will open up a little bit. And remember, we're looking for about 4-second exhales through an open mouth, like a sigh. Longer can be better. And then easy inhales through the nose, not a lot of effort on those. So that's usually my first go-to move. After that, I might go to something like a hook line with a reach. Now I'm doing this a little different with a band because I really need to get my right side external rotation fired up more than any other thing. So I do this with a band. I'm kind of putting a ball between my feet to help me get the offset that I need to get a late ER representation of that right side. So again, anytime you see that knee shift, we're just doing that. We're just centering our sacrum a little bit, evening up our ilium. So I'm going to get my ribs to drop, but not by really crunching my abs just by exhaling, letting them go down through a more relative motion. You're going to pull a little bit of pressure with your heels. You don't have to use the block. I'm just using it for this. You see how I'm shifting my knees? I'm pushing the right forward. Again, if you fall into this category, you want to do hook line with that little shift, because that's going to really help a lot, get us the left posterior expansion that we need. And so you're just hanging out here for like 2 sets of 4 breaths. Usually a lot of the PRA practitioners recommend 4 sets of 4 breaths, so you can do it more, but if you're really effective at it, it doesn't take that much. So again, we want that right knee forward. Don't be pulling like out on the band with the left knee. That's just kind of a placeholder. You can slightly pull out with the right, but you got to keep those foot contacts, that inner heel and that first med head. Now, another way a lot of you guys might benefit from doing this is with the ball between your legs instead of on your feet and having the band. And so you can see that little shift. I'm going to pull the left knee back as that right goes forward. And I'm going to start with that low reach, but I'm going to switch this to get a little bit more into that left side, which would be good for most of you guys. So you're going to bend that left elbow. As you do that, you kind of slightly shorten that left side and get that rib engage. You're going to reach across the body a little bit. When you do that, it's going to turn your spine, turn the spinal processes a little bit to the right, and it's going to open up space between your left scapula and your spine, get that dorsal rostral area to really expand, get that posterior rib cage to move back in space. So I'm going to do the same kind of reach, but I'm going to go a little across the body and feel myself get heavier on the left side as I do that. So I should have some left abs on. Everything else is the same. Now that move is good for a lot of you guys who are combined with a lot of compression too. So if you're a little bit more compressed, meaning you, like say you have pretty bad straight leg raises on both sides and you're a little more flared, you would benefit from doing that with the ball. Even though you're a little asymmetrical, you're still kind of like ER'd out. So we want to get you a little more in line. So you'd be good with the ball. So this is a good move to move you back in space. Again, we're going to shift back the left knee, and the arm position is pretty similar to what I did on the hook line. So this is what it looks like from the hook line position, just on the wall essentially. So same concept, and we're doing this. We're still on those 2 contact points, but we're a little heavier on the heel, and this is to kind of shift our center of gravity back. So you have the post-capsule inhibition, you have a hook line, you have this wall reach, and there's a lot of things you could do. Sometimes I take my people through the whole hip repositioning cycle where we do our left side adductor, and then we go to our right side glute max. We might do left hamstring first. This is kind of a shorter thing. I didn't want to go through a ton of these. There are more of these on the PRI and bodybuilding video as well. So definitely check that out. There are more options. These are just some quicker ones that work. Now this is a side-lying cross connect, and what we're doing on here is we're going to try to accomplish a lot of kind of orientation with one move. So sometimes I will pull this apart into 2 or 3 different moves, but sometimes you can get it just with one. And so we're in this position. We have the right hip is typically going to be a little higher. It won't always present that way, but it'll still be like higher relative, but then your sacrum's tipped a little bit. So it's like an orientation if your right hip's not higher. It'll always be a little bit just because it's more in an IR position. So what's going to happen when I lay on my side, this left ilium that's really ER'd is going to have to it's going to be forced to change its shape into a little more IR representation. I'm going to put this foot up on the wall, which is going to be like a late ER stance. I'm going to apply some force. What that's going to do, that's going to get that little shift. So my pelvis is going to go from being hiked up on the right side. As I push that wall, it shifts and kind of gets hiked up on the left. So I'm activating my glute mid to do that. So now I'm kind of more in an ER representation on the right side and more IR on the left based off of that push off of that wall. I'm also going to turn over that left side a little bit, because remember, this is how I'm walking around. If I'm on my side, I can turn over and get that sacrum to turn, and I got a lot better shape back to my pelvis. So you got to get in a position where the top leg is almost straight, not quite, and even though we're applying force, we're never applying force like super hard. Everything's pretty easy, like a 2 or 3 tops effort. And so I'm trying to push off the inner part of my foot. Think about like the arch. You can get a little bit pigeony on there. And I'm gonna think about being really straight and then slowly getting this right hip to turn into the left just a little bit. So a lot of people, you'll start, like you won't start stacked, you'll start turned back there. Make sure you're really stacked. We're gonna reach with the right hand as you exhale. So I should be feeling some glute mid on this right side, maybe some glute max too actually. And then maybe a little inner thigh very faintly if you do this really well. So heavy on that inner foot. And so sometimes just with that, you can change all your measurements because you've reoriented the pelvis in a really positive way. Now, if you're just super fucked and most of your measurements are shit, you might need to go through, like I said, the whole pelvis repositioning. And I think I do that on the PRI and bodybuilding video. So now we're going to get into some of our warm-ups. And even though we're not doing the breathing drills, it's still super important to be aware of the breath. So this is going to be a DNS star on the right side only. So there's different ways. You can just hold it right here, and I'm really trying to open my pelvis, like I'm trying to end up facing the ceiling basically with my torso and my pelvis. So we can just hold that for breaths. I want to try to get your palm down best you can. I should put a ramp there actually to get better. Or you can do this for like repetitions where you drop and turn under into a little bit of IR, and then you drive up into that ER position. I still like to hold it. Typically, I'll just have my guys hold it, because sometimes we drive too much IR if we go too far under there. So I usually like to just hold it. And you won't do that on the left side. Sometimes there's something different I do on the left, but it's a little tricky. So I'll show you guys some other options. So you can just think about what's happening on that right side. Again, we're here. If I'm laying on that right side and I'm pushing through that knee, lifting up my top side, look at all the ER I'm getting on that bottom leg. So I'm going to go from here, pushing up, really getting action rotation like a late ER bias on the right side, which is what you want. This is something that I really like. I like to do these integrated drills. I don't have a ton of people do them. There's a ton of different ones that I do. I'm just going to show you one of them. For this, you want to get your foot up on a block, and then we're going to really drive down with that left arm, get those ribs to drop, feel your low lats, low traps. Your head should come over with a little bit. You're going to open up that right side. We want the left rib cage down, the right side up. We want the left side protracted, the right side retracted. The left side depressed, the right side elevated. So just going the exact opposite way of you normally walking around, most likely, and trying to get air in through there. We're going to be really heavy on this left inner foot, and we're pushing off our right, kind of arch, try to get a shift onto that left. So the whole goal of this is to get your sacrum to turn a little bit and get your body comfortable in a left stance. So you got to make sure that that left hip represents IR. So I'm shifting into that left side, pushing off the arch, engaging those left abs and getting the good breaths in from there. Make sure that you're not super anteriorly tipped. You're not arched in your back when you're there. You want to be a little more relaxed. You're going to be pretty neutral in your spine, you can think of. So sometimes, depending on how tight or loose I am, if I'm like not that tight, I can just do something like that, and it takes care of everything I need right then. That's a real good way for me to lower my left shoulder if my left shoulder is starting up high. So another really easy warm-up that you can do if you're dealing with this left AIC or right lateralized issue or scoliosis is you do a heavy-ish, not super crazy heavy, but a decently heavy single hand farmer's carry on the right side. So as you do this, look what's happening, right? I'm having to activate these left abs. I'm also in a more internally rotated position of that left femur, and the right side is going to be more externally rotated just because it's pushing away from the weight. So you got to make sure to have the hand swing when you do this, have the opposite arm swing, and you got to have a little of that side bend on that left side. I'm actually like a little too tipped over when I'm actually looking at myself. I should have a little more just like of a side bend. Like I look a little better coming forward. Arm should be a little tighter to my side too. But you want to go like you got to pee somewhere, but you can't run there. You're in a busy place. So don't think about too much besides hitting with the heels at first. And sometimes that by itself can really help shift you out of that right side. And there's a lot of examples of things you can do. I'm just giving you some of the most common ones that I do. You don't have to do these all every single time. Okay, now we're going to get into some loaded reorientation things. So this is similar to the very first move where we did the left side post-capsule inhibition, but this one is called your Camperini deadlift. The whole purpose of this one is just to reorient that pelvis. So like you saw me do earlier with the foot on the block, the goal on this is to turn this pelvis a little bit and posteriorly tip a little bit. So this is a reorientation move. So it's basically like a single leg deadlift. You should really have vast majority of the weight on that left leg. You're kind of using that right leg just to kind of push forward. And again, you're kind of thinking about wrapping around the left a little bit. So after you do this and you've repositioned your pelvis, so now I'm a little less here, I'm a little more even, then you can go after the relative motion. So the whole purpose of this Camperini move is a reorientation, okay? So we've got the relative motion where we're off, then we've got the tip, and then the rotation, okay? So we're in that back side. Whenever we have that back heel elevated, what that's gonna do, that's gonna start allowing us to pull posteriorly the whole left side of the pelvis. Because remember, the left side of the pelvis is it's in a more ER bias, so that means the ilium is more counter-nutated. That left sacrum, the left side of the sacrum, is actually more flexed. It's more counter-nutated relative to the right. So the left side is forward, but it's because of an orientation. The right side is forward because it's a nutation because of the internal rotation bias on the right side. So we're trying to reorient the pelvis from this position to basically here. So we're not going to do a ton as far as the relative motion goes at first. We're going to kind of reposition this here, so now we can go after that relative motion with an ipsilateral loaded move that's real similar. So again, that wedge is going to posteriorly tip the whole pelvis on that left side. And then as I shift into that, you're going to kind of see that motion. So to go after the relative motion, we're going to flip the wedge around and we're going to go ipsilateral. All right. So now we're going to drive more nutation on the left side because we're in a better orientation. We're in a better kind of resting position for our axial skeleton to actually go after that. If you don't reposition first, then you can't do this. So this isn't like 100% on the left leg like the Camperini deadlift. This one we're using both legs, but the right is offset forward a little bit. It's a little more ER biased. So we've done the reorientation to go from here to here. Now this is the relative motion that's going to help us get that back, our ability to get on that left side. So if we start with the right foot a little bit in front, it's going to help us ER that right side. And then when we go on the wedge reverse, that's actually going to tip us into nutation on the left side. But again, if we're already oriented anteriorly, then we can't really use the wedge to get it in nutation bias because we're just not in a position to get it. We're already there. We don't have space to go. So we got to reorient together, so then we have relative motion space to move into. So first move, the Camperini deadlift goes from here to here. The ipsilateral goes from here to there. That provides that relative motion. The breathing is also really important on this. For both of these moves, you want to go down in an inhaled state. So take your deep breath in, go down, exhale as you come up. And that's because we want to take advantage of the breathing mechanics that affect the pelvis. So an inhaled state goes with counter nutation in ER. Exhale goes with nutation in IR. So if we start from an inhaled state, we're going to be as external rotated as we can start. That's going to give us more opportunity to create IR. And one more good shifting move we can do is this left foot elevated. We're slightly offset with the right, and we're really just pushing back onto that left. So you see a lot of people on their squat pattern, they kind of, when they get tired or they get heavy or they're just tight, they almost do this the opposite way sometimes, you'll see. So again, we're driving a sacral turn to the left and we're driving IR on the left. So it's always that same thing right there we're going for. So you should be heavy on the left inner foot, should feel a lot of quad, potentially some inner thigh. The right leg is kind of pushing us back on the left. Okay, so now we should be like in a good position as far as your pelvis goes. Now we're just gonna bias where you're less efficient and we're gonna provide a little more movement variability by getting good at those. All right, so this is a left foot elevated split squat. And we want the left foot elevated because that's gonna, again, reorient that left side of the pelvis. Gonna allow us to have more IR space to drive into. So when you do this, you wanna make sure to have the left inner heel be the main focus, and you've gotta be a little bit IR biased with your pelvis. So all that means is when I'm in that split stance, I can't have this left side just hanging out forward. I gotta get whatever I can as far as turning into IR without just losing my inner contact points with the foot without letting the knee turn out. So I gotta just turn to that a little bit. Don't let that happen. When we go to the right side, it'll be the opposite. Your body's gonna wanna really turn to that side. You kind of don't let it. Push a little forward with the right knee. Don't let the hip come out because that's orientation. So it's not that, it's that. They go a little bit together, but not as one. So if I'm doing a split on the right, I'm gonna start a little biased that way. The pant line's gonna stay centered, maybe go slightly left. Left foot forward. I'm gonna go a little more bias in internal rotation. Pant line's still gonna go to the left. So you can take a little more left heel for a reference point when you do left stuff, and maybe a slightly more vertical shin angle than when we do right. For the right, we wanna get that late propulsive, that late ER going. Left, we wanna kind of turn into a stance leg. So you wanna try to get your pelvis under you, get your rib cage stacked over it. Make sure that your back leg is straight down. You don't want to be anteriorly tipped there. And it's just about getting good breaths. So you should feel quad. You should feel a little bit of butt as well. Most people on this, they make the error of like getting too much anterior tip in their hips, the right leg's not straight down, or they push too far forward with his left. We want it to be a pretty vertical shin angle. So these are all isometrics for now. There's nothing wrong with loading this. You can turn into reps like I'm doing here, a little more myo reps. So when we go to the right side, we want to set that up to be more late stance, more propulsive. We need to get better at getting off the right side. So we're going to elevate the back foot to kind of push you forward in space a little bit more. And we're also going to elevate the front heel. You don't necessarily have to elevate the front heel. I just like it. And so when we do the heel versus the wedge, it's a lot different. If our whole foot's on the wedge, that just shifts everything back. We create more of an ER representation of our foot. It's more domed. If we just use something under only the heel, that's actually going to shift your center of gravity forward, and that's going to promote more of a late stance representation of your foot. It's going to help you kind of pronate and get the arch to go down. Typically, not always, but typically if you're in this presentation, the right side might have a little higher arch, might be a little more rigid compared to the left. All right, so as I'm doing this, you can see I just turned that pelvis just very slightly, and now I'm leading with that knee a lot more forward. I have a lot more forward center of gravity just in general, and I'm just going to hang out there and breathe. Now, when you have the right leg forward, you should be feeling a lot of lower outer butt if you have that little turn in the pelvis, which we really want. Remember, all that little turn is just that little bit. You should be feeling your lower outer butt cheek. If you feel a lot of hamstring attachment, then you're not quite in the ER bias. Similarly, if you're doing the left leg forward and you feel the left outer butt, then you know you're not really an internal rotation bias. You're doing something weird. So you should feel like quad and hamstring attachment, maybe like your big butt a little bit, but not the outer butt. And you can put the right arm forward to help facilitate a little bit of a turn in there as well. So now I'm doing some reps, and I'm really focused on getting that posterior glute mid fibers to burn. So my body wants to shift into that right side, but I'm not letting it. But I'm not getting funky, trying to fight it. All right, so I really like that isometric split squat combo that we just went over. We're more just holding isometrically in those positions of an internal rotation bias on the left side and external rotation bias on the right side. So after that, this is a great option if you're missing IR on both sides, but just more on the left. So you can present asymmetrically in this left AIC pattern, but still be needing a little bit of both. So we might not always only want to drive ER on the right side. Sometimes we want to drive IR with the ability to have some lateral force production, and that can be really beneficial as well. So it's not always getting ER. If you've got pretty good ER table tests, you might not necessarily need to drive more ER through your warm-up. So this would be somebody who still shows that they're lateralized to the right side on most tests, but their IRs are a little closer together, like their IR might only be a little bit better than their left. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna set your right foot up on the block, and this is going to set you in a little bit more of an ER bias position to start with. So we're gonna start a little bit more forward than we normally would. Normally we're kind of really sitting back here. Just having that foot elevated will help us get into a little more of an ER bias, and that's gonna allow us to find a little more space to IR into. So if you're missing a little bit of IR on the right side, this is a great way to pick it up. And so we wanna think about those contact points of the inner heel, that first med head always. You can see you're starting a little open right there, and then you're gonna just drive in and naturally turn into it just a little bit. You're not trying to get like a crazy huge turn into this like we might drive on some other moves, especially on the left side, but we are driving internal rotation mainly here from a position of external rotation, which a lot of times we don't have the ability to come from a position of external rotation on the right side, so this can be really good. A lot of times we don't produce internal rotation correctly on the right side because we don't have real space to move into, so this is a good option if you need IR. What I like to pair that with, if you need to drive more IR to your left, like say you have terrible IR on your left and just bad IR on your right, you would do that first, and then this would really drive some more internal rotation on your left. Is a Jefferson split squat. And so when you're set up, you can see it naturally is going to kind of turn you into that left side. You're going to have a little bit of that side bend, just naturally. Left shoulder will be lower than the right, and you're going to turn into it as you come down. So you can kind of stay coiled the whole time, kind of like I am. It's kind of like WEC method-y. Or you can kind of unwind at the top and go in a little more ER at the beginning. So with that, you would just allow your hips to open a little bit more. So I'm gonna come down into IR, I'm gonna open that right hip up into ER. So it seems like it might be an awkward setup, but it actually feels really comfortable. And I normally hate any kind of like a Jefferson where it's underneath in between your legs. They're usually really awkward, but this is not at all. All right, so after the isometrics, you have that option where we're driving a little bit more IR on both sides, but more on the left than on the right. Or if you have just pretty typical measurements where you're really needing a lot more ER on the right, you've got good IR measurements, this would be a good option. So it's going to be similar to how we set up with the first one, but I don't have my front heel elevated on this. I typically don't do that if I'm starting to really load it up. And you could load this up. This could be kind of the start of your workout, still kind of like a really active warm-up. But again, I'm in that kind of ER representation. That right hip is a little bit in front because I got that back foot up. So that's always going to drive some ER. Then I'm going to switch it to a front foot elevated to get the IR on the left side. So this is real similar to what I just did on the right earlier, but now I'm going to really like drive more into the left than you probably would into the right. Into the right, you would just kind of let the weight and gravity do it. On the left, you might consciously think about turning into it as long as you can keep those foot contacts. So you can see I'm really a little more vertical on that shin angle. It's going to be more through the heel, or the other one is going to be a little more of a positive shin angle. So anytime we're training more ER on the right, we're going to have a little more forward shin angle. And then typically when we're doing anything split stance on the left, it'll be a little more vertical shin angle. All right, so step up is a good option. And all these warm-ups, you really only need like one set of each of these. I really like this. This is actually a step down. It's not a step up. I like the step down, especially on the left side, because it really drives some internal rotation, and it really helps, I feel like, break up some posterior compression. As we're going down on the right side, we're really driving a turn and getting this stuff back here to like kind of break up and move. So this can cause a lot of improvements in range of motion on the table. So you want to be thinking about your two contact points, especially the inner heel. You're going to have the right leg kind of right down next to you. Even it could even be a little more forward. And that's because we want to help facilitate that turn into the left side. You want to hold on to the side of the rack just to kind of keep your body pulled over there. You want to make sure that we don't accidentally start shortening the right side. Anytime we have a weight in there, we run the risk of like just closing down that right side when it's already closed down. We don't want to do that. So you should be feeling a lot of hamstring attachment on that. And you should be feeling a little bit of adductor. Okay, if you feel outer glute, like lower outer glute, then you've had some fuckery go on, and you've like oriented in a real subtle way that's kind of recruiting what we don't want, what's already overactive. And then for the right side, we're going to go ipsilateral. You could put the plate under the heel on this one. That's fine. Again, just make sure that we don't really get too much of a right side bend as we do this. Keep the left abs on. And you should feel that outer butt on this side. If you feel hamstring or a lot of inner thigh, like if you feel like that hamstring tie-in, then you know you've done some fuckery on this side and you've made it more of an IR bias. So what I like to do on this left side is kind of kick it back a little bit further relative to where I had the right when I was putting weight on the left leg. And that'll just help facilitate that ER representation, that late stance bias, that little bit of that hip shift going forward on the right. And you only need about 60 degrees. If you go deeper than that, you're really not optimizing ER. On the other one, you could drop lower, but you probably won't be able to. You can think about going as low as you can, keeping that tension. So they're both probably about 60 degrees. So we've got a split squat warm-up. We've got a step down warm-up. Then we want to do some kind of a split hinge warm-up, some sort of a kickstand deadlift. These are money. And you can actually, as you get better at these, you can start loading certain versions of this up pretty heavily. Like I do a really heavy kickstand deadlift variation. My ass gets so sore from it. But there's a few different ways you can set this up. And a lot of people, they like to use the roller against the wall because it kind of puts a natural block on you, so you can't really fuck it up too bad. It also gives you a reference to drive a little internal rotation force against if it's on the inside of your knee. And so when we're driving IR, you would set up this way. It'd be against the wall on the inside of your knee. We want to make sure that we are thinking about that left inner heel is going to be our main contact point. You're going to turn the palm to you, or you could even pronate it all the way, and you're going to close down this left side a little bit. Keep those abs on. Reach towards the big toe with the right hand. As you're going down, this right hip is going to naturally turn in a little bit and drive that IR. So you got to make sure your foot's in a position where you can feel those contact points. Sometimes people get a little funky there, and you can see I'm staying coiled. This is looking like some Weck method kind of stuff, and you know I'm not all about the Weck method, but a lot of times these crazy dudes have these wild ideas like within it, like come up with some pretty unique and good perspectives. We just, can't take everything they say at face value, but they do provide good insights. So this would be the opposite. So this is kind of, think of this would be the same setup kind of as someone who would need to do the step down version where we had the right foot elevated and the kettlebell in the left hand. So this would be someone who needs some IR on the right side, but not as much as they need on the left. They need some IR on the right, and they also need to get improved at lateral force production. So this is a great way. If you really just need ER and you don't really need any IR, then I would hold the kettlebell in the right hand. that would drive just way more ER. But this is a great setup, and you're making sure that that left hip doesn't turn in super hard into the right. And this, man, the lights suck in my gym, sorry. And so there's a few other versions. You could do a back foot elevated with the kettlebell on the same side. So on this, we don't have the reference from the foam roller against the wall, but we have the foot reference against the wall, and that can really help square up your pelvis, so it can benefit a lot in different ways. And again, anytime we're on the right side, make sure we don't overly shorten that. And so this would be someone who needed a lot of ER on the right, because I got the back foot elevated. It's really going to thrust me forward. I typically don't like to do the heel elevated too much on more hinge patterns. I usually use that more for squats, but it's going to be real hard not to turn into that right hip as you're going down. So you want to feel that lower outer butt. That's how you know if you're in there. Again, people who say the mind-muscle connection does not matter, they are really clueless in my opinion, because if you don't feel it in the right spot, you're going to go do some table tests and it's going to look like shit. If you feel it in the right spot, your table tests are going to show it. You're going to look a lot better. So this is the same thing without the elevated back foot. You can just go flat. That's totally fine. You can see you don't want to turn into there. You got to try to turn away naturally. Don't let yourself sink in as soon as you go. Fight that. Now, you can't fight it so much that you start orienting your whole body and get all fucking weird, but make these subtle little movements to keep the tension where you want. And if you keep the reference foot on the back wall, it should help with that. This would be how you would set up the internal rotation one on the wall. So same thing. I like to actually pronate the palm all the way on this version. And again, I'm keeping that coiled position as I'm coming up. I typically don't like to unwind out of it, but you could. I mean, just depending on what you want to do, you can get some ER at the top if you pull out of that a little bit and just drive right back in. A lot of times if you're like on the extreme side of being asymmetrical, I kind of like to keep you coiled to that left. So I would say that is like all the warm-up stuff there is. The rest of it is just the workout. So let's do a quick recap. So first you got to decide, am I a left AIC? Am I in a right lateralized posture? So go check out my PRI and bodybuilding videos to see which category you fall into. I go through all the tests on there. And if you have like just dog shit testing, like you're missing range of motion everywhere. Say you've got like sub 45 degrees straight leg raise, sub 20 degrees ER, sub 10 degrees IR. You're compressed as fuck. You need to do the breathing exercises. You should probably pick like 3 to 4, and just do those before you start your workout. If you got really good table tests and you're just asymmetrical, like you still have range though, but it's just a difference in range, you might be okay with just 1 or 2 of the breathing moves, and then you can go right into the correctional warm-up exercises that we just went over, and that will probably be enough to reposition you. So over time, you can do less. Like I used to do a lot to warm up as far as breathing. I do a lot of corrective warm-ups before I go into my workout. Now I hit 1 or 2 breathing moves, and I do spend some decent time on the warm-ups because I like to load this up pretty heavy, but it doesn't take anything from my workout at all anymore. I would think if you did everything you need to do, this workout would be about an hour and a half. All right, so our first move, as far as the meat and potatoes go, is gonna be this seated leg curl. Now what I'm gonna do is real subtle here. I'm gonna pull this left knee back. You can see the foot move back just a little bit. Sometimes I have people use a ball between their knees to help connect with it. See, it just went back, now it's normal, now it's pulled back. I'm also gonna combine that pull back with a pretty good posterior tilt of the pelvis. What that's gonna do, that's gonna really allow me to recruit those upper posterior hamstring fibers, especially the left side, which we really want, because remember the pelvis is tipped more anteriorly on the left side, so we need more of those upper fibers to help reorient. So this is a great way to kind of really finalize the position we were trying to establish with the warm-ups. And so I'll do maybe 1 set this way with the left leg shift, and then I might just do 2 normal sets where I'm not really shifting, but I'm keeping that posterior tilt, because it's really important, because we want those upper hamstring fibers. You got to feel the middle to upper hamstrings on this. Otherwise, you're not getting the benefit that we want. So you want to make sure to keep your stack, keep that tilt. Don't let your rib cage go. Don't arch. Next, I like to go over to the hyperextension, and I get into this position that's going to really bias my left hamstring, kind of take care of my rib cage asymmetry as well as my pelvis asymmetry. This is called a elastic limit hold. You're going to basically be in this position. You have the left arm down. You have the left arm down by your side, and you're really driving that left shoulder down by activating the low traps and low latch. Feel some abs in there. And you're gonna grab the band and you're gonna pull forward and reaching for there. It's almost like you'd be going there, but we're just like getting to that point before we get to the full wrap around. So I'm gonna be right there. And what that's gonna do, that's gonna get my rib cage to open up on the right side, close down on the left. That's actually gonna shift my sternum to the left and help my rib cage actually go to the right, because I'm internally rotating on the left while I'm opening the right side. So this is gonna help you feel a lot more left hamstring. A lot of times I see people doing these hyperextensions and it's like they look uneven, like one side of the butt looks higher or like more developed. And as they get into this position, it really evens up. So if you present with scoliosis, especially, this is a great way to get that left hamstring to do its job. So same thing, I usually do one set like this, and then I'll do 1 to 2 sets normal bilateral loaded, making sure I don't lose that connection I just established by doing that elastic limit hold. So when I do this, I'm not going to be using any weight. After a set of this, then I'll go and I'll add a little bit of weight and just go bilateral. So anytime I do this kind of stuff, a lot of my clients, they tend to tip over. They become the metronome. This is something that me and Eric Seifert were talking about in our last podcast, is not getting real lateral side bend. You don't want to tip over, just barely side bend. All right, I love single leg presses, especially if it's this one. So if you have it, this is like money if you can set this up. So this is a Cybex leg press. I'm able to get my foot really comfortably on the floor. There's not like a bar there. The seat's it doesn't go so far that I can't get my foot down comfortably and drive a little pressure through there. So feel those 2 contact points, the inner heel and that first med head, and actually like drive some hamstring activation by pulling that heel into the ground. That is going to really stabilize your pelvis, because a lot of times when we do this right side, your hip just wants to hike up because we don't have any ability to fight that. We're already like driving back into that right side, so we turn to there real aggressively. So I'm on leg press, my little femurs are up, this one will be down. As I lower the right side, a lot of times it's just gonna turn hard into there. If I activate this left hamstring on the ground, I'm gonna really stabilize that pelvis. It's gonna be a lot harder to create that turn into the right. You can also think about that little shift that we keep talking about. You're gonna pull the left knee back a little bit and then get that hamstring activation. When you're using this right leg, you really wanna think about just pushing away from the sled. Don't let that hip hike up. Get used to like hold the bottom position, and then try to like set your right hip even a little bit more neutral. Like if it's a little high at all, even it up and see what that feels like. So I'm making sure that I don't end up super heavy on this right SI joint. I want to be pretty even on there when I'm doing the right side. And when I go to the left, on this day, I was actually like really kind of crooked, so I added a reach. You might not need to do the reach. I typically don't add the reach, but if you're super crooked, then it could be okay. It could be beneficial. So I'm gonna have my right foot on the ground, but I'm not gonna pull it back. I'm actually gonna push it forward. And I'm not really activating the hamstring, but I'm applying a little bit of that forward force while I'm keeping pressure on those 2 contact points. I'm using that reach to facilitate that little more of that turn into that left side, really making sure I stay on those left contact points on the leg press so I don't drive out my knee, or I don't lose pressure on there and turn this into more of an ER representation. So should feel a little bit of inner thigh, probably on the left side if you get in there really good on this one. So I really like to do these single leg. This isn't one that I do unilateral and then go to bilateral. I just load this up heavy unilaterally. You should be probably like a little heavier on your left SI joint when you're doing the left leg. So after you're done doing the leg press, do something bilateral. You should be good now. You should be able to be like aware. So typically I like a hat squat, because that really gives you good reference for your SI joints to make sure that you're even on there. And you can keep the same principles that we've been talking about and apply it to bilateral movement. So if you know that you're a little crooked, you can set yourself up straight, especially because you've got something to reference against your back, against those SI joints. So at this point, you shouldn't be super fucking crooked, but you probably are a little bit. So let's say we went from there to like there. So we're just a little bit off. I can kind of like set myself on the pad, and I can get some left posterior expansion by kind of pulling back and under, and I can kind of even up myself. So I can go from being crooked to a little bit less crooked if I really reference that left lower back, kind of flatten that out and kind of shift just a little bit before I start. And then your feet can be even, that's fine, but you can think about like applying a little bit of that force that we've been talking about, but not to the point where it's moving, just isometrically. So that knee shift is what I'm talking about. So instead of actually shifting the left knee back relative to the right, we kind of apply just enough force in that direction, coming back with the left and forward with the right, to fight it going in the opposite direction on the way down. Because as you're going down, if you fall into this category, your left knee's going to want to shoot forward and out, and your right one's going to want to sink back. So if we're kind of isometrically just matching that force that makes us want to compensate, we won't move, but we'll fight that and we'll get even activation. And sometimes you can play with offsetting your foot just a little bit on the right and pushing into the left a little bit too. You can explore that option as well. Now we can move on to some Bulgarians if you wanted to. This is how you would set them up to kind of counter your imbalances. Now, anytime we're in a Bulgarian setup, it's more of a late stance position because we're really pushed forward in space because our back foot is so elevated. It's going to be more ER bias. So it's funny, is a lot of times these type of people, if you fall in this category, you'll be like really good on your right leg in the majority of things, just like a normal split stance, maybe lunges, maybe back lunges. But once we start really playing with your center of gravity and thrusting it forward, a lot of times the left leg becomes unstable and we feel funky on the right in this position. What we would want to do when we're on this left leg, we're going to pull the weights just a little bit across that midline of the body to facilitate that turn. You could fully pronate the arm, or you could just have it facing you, and the left arm will move a little tiny bit behind you. We're going to think the heel for the main reference, and the shin will be forward because it's just a Bulgarian. It's going to be kind of forward, but it'll probably be slightly less forward than the right will be. So you can see that left shoulder is always a little below the right anytime we bias this IR over here. Now when we set up on the right, depending on how crooked you are, you may need to bias it a little bit offset. So you can move the right arm a little bit in front of you like I just did there. Left can go a little bit back. Or you can keep it just normal without thinking about it and just adjust on the left side. It just depends on what you need to feel stable and to get the right amount of ER that we're looking for. So on the right side, the knee will be a little bit more forward because we're trying to drive a little bit more of that late stage ER. And we should feel a lot of glutes on both of these, but even more outer buns on this right side. So if you did those hyperextensions heavy, you might not need to do a hinge, but if you just did it as kind of a warm up to get yourself into that left side a little bit more, you could do a bilateral hinge, or you could do something like this. This isn't something I typically recommend for most of my clients or people, but I do it a lot. So if you notice, I have my left foot elevated on a very small plate, and my right foot is very slightly in front of my left. So I'm going to do my stiff legs from this position. And what this is actually pretty similar to is that ipsilateral deadlift we did with your left foot on the backwards wedge where your toes are elevated, and we were trying to drive that relative motion. So this is, again, this is going to drive a little more relative nutation on the left side, and then my foot position being a little bit forward is going to drive a little more of the external rotation stuff on my right. So if I were set up normal, meaning like my feet were even, I would be recruiting a lot more of my internal stuff on my right and a lot more external rotation stuff on my left. This setup kind of allows me to require equal amounts from both. So I have to make it this way to get enough IR out of the left, and I have to step forward a little bit to get enough ER out of the right, so that they just end up being about the same. So this can actually be really good for your back. A lot of times people, when they hinge, they have like a little bit of asymmetry in their lumbar spine, sometimes in their rectors. And then when you set them up on this, a lot of times that goes away. So this is, you can go heavy on this. Again, I'm not recommending most of you guys fuck with this. It's just something to kind of play with or to be aware of that it is a tool out there. I don't program this for anybody actually, except for myself. I mean, ultimately this move is helpful because if you're asymmetrical, you can't always take a symmetrical approach to fix your shit. Sometimes you gotta get asymmetrical. So even though we feel like we're squared up and our hips are neutral and our feet are pointing forward, we're not forward if our whole sacrum and everything wants to turn to the right, and then we have to counter that by everything going left. And so now this left femur is going all ER, the right's going IR. Even though we look squared, we're not. We're all kinds of crooked. So this actually gets us less crooked and more squared up. And this is just lighter weight, just kind of a demonstration from a different angle, so you can see everything's the same. I'm just slightly offset. So you don't want a big plate, 2.5 or 5 tops is all you need. And that's actually better than a wedge too for this move. You don't want to put the whole foot on there. All right, I'm not saying you need to do all this volume together in one workout, but if you did want to do some walking lunges, this is how we would do them. It's pretty often you see somebody do some walking lunges, they get all shaky on one side or things start to look a little different. That's because they're just over internally rotating on the right and not getting enough of it on the left. So when you go to the right, just think normal. When you step to the left, just bring that right hand across in that pronated position. You can see that'll drive the amount of IR that we really want on there. And that'll keep you from looking really different on your legs. All right, so that is a complete workout for the scoliotic bodybuilder, for the right lateralized bodybuilder, for the left AIC pattern bodybuilder. And this is the same stuff I program for a lot of my clients and for myself. And we apply a lot of these same concepts and principles to pretty much the entire workout, stuff to be aware of. I mean, I don't go as OCD with you guys as I do with myself, but I'm shifting certain ways when I'm doing my arms. I'm doing certain things as I'm doing presses to help get expansion where I need it. And I don't know if you necessarily need to think about it that much, but it's been giving me good results as far as improvements in my asymmetries and feeling even better joint wise. And I haven't had to like lower the intensity. So if you deal with asymmetries, it can be very frustrating. I know. This should help a lot with your lower body stuff. I'm going to put out a video soon on how to fix uneven pecs, and that'll take care of a lot of the upper body stuff, because if you have an uneven pecs, it's a positional issue, and that same positional issue is going to cause asymmetries everywhere else. So you might have uneven shoulders and it will still apply to you. But just know that there is stuff that you can do, because a lot of people feel helpless about this. But like I said earlier in the video, don't get so fucking neurotic that you stop making progress in the gym, okay? We want to get it so that you can make way more progress and you can work hard without having to think about it, okay? So don't overthink this shit, all right? All right, so hopefully this helps out a little bit. Thanks a lot for the support, guys.